my god, this is one of the first times in ages that I'm recording like this. It's one of the first times in at least a month now that I'm recording just thoughts while not walking outside. But let's not talk about that and instead talk about the actual thing I want to talk about. And it's a fun two things. Dark Souls and programming. And learning. Don't worry, it will at least sort of make sense in a bit. So the day that this is recorded, Gopher uploaded his video talking about why he doesn't hate bonfires in Dark Souls, but does hate safe stations in things like Alien Isolation, that other Alien game. And rather obviously, I tended to agree with his point. But in the end, he made a remark that actually kind of made me think. You learn from repetition. People who play Dark Souls should probably already know that. Because that is what Dark Souls has a lot of. Fighting the same path through the same enemies in at least mostly the same way. And through that repetition, you get better at it. As in, you learn it. You learn from your mistakes. You learn how to do it better, how to do it faster. But for that, I would like to state an obvious thing that kind of opposes that. Everyone learns differently. Some people learn through repetition. Other people learn just through reading. Other people learn from seeing things while they are busy doing certain actions. And yes, the three that I mentioned are kind of deliberate, I guess. The last one especially. Let me know if you figure out what that's a reference to. And not even everyone learns the same way for everything. For instance, when it comes to something like biology, I never studied biology or something. I made it through education by just, at least most of the stuff in biology I hear once and it sticks in my mind. Of course, that meant that those few occasions where we had to do calculations, I absolutely sucked. But just knowledge about biology was something that came to me naturally. Languages, on the other hand, endless repeating, endless doing tests. Dyslexia, that stuff was a nightmare. In Dutch we, at least my family calls it stompen, which literally translates into stomping, as in you are stomping it into your head. And the type of learning that I am actually going further with is the type of learning that I practice for math and programming. This type of learning consists of doing it and then really figuring out all the ins and outs through doing it. And that is the type of learning that I also do in every other case, but generally with some caveats. For instance, speaking English is kind of something that I did that way, but other parts of English I had to kind of forcefully learn. And I think this is my main way of learning. I can learn through other means, but this is the main way, just doing it and through doing it getting a great understanding of it. That doesn't really mix well with Dark Souls. Because Dark Souls isn't a terribly complicated game. Especially not once you have a build going, because then it is just execute the thing your build is good for properly. So I just have this very powerful knight who swings a very big sword around and hides behind a shield if it can be blocked or dodges out of the way. Although it's more a case of rolls out of the way if it's kind of an aerial attack, or if there's space and I can easily dodge it, and using my shield when that's not the case. Now, even in learning how to program and stuff like that, and in maths, you'll repeat a lot of stuff. You'll do very similar things over and over to really get a good feel for it. But, well, even in school I always did generally just a part of all the assignments, because at some point I had figured out how it worked. I knew the ins and outs, and therefore more repeating was useless. It did nothing for me. And this is something that simply doesn't really work with Dark Souls. Dark Souls wants you to really master what you are doing. But I personally don't master stuff, at least not in that way. I don't master something by doing it over and over and over. I master something by just getting a good understanding of exactly how it works, and then I can just easily do it at any time. Because, at least my prediction for what I'll show on screen is, on one side, me playing Dark Souls that I installed just for this video, and on the other, me programming. And if you're wondering what I'm programming, well, if you followed me on Twitter, you know that I want to kind of redo how my logo appears in the intro. And I make that one appear with programming. But the way I did it was kind of inefficient and I kept changing my mind, so instead of making a program that makes my logo appear, I'm going to make a program that makes a program that makes my logo appear. Which will mean I'm making it probably a lot more complicated, but it's also a lot more flexible. So if somebody else also has a logo that they want to make appear like mine, I can just give them my program and then they can make it themselves. And just making fun use out of things like do big array lists and one array list for the points, one array list for the triangles. No, I think it's just 2 array lists. Well, and probably an array list for the order in which the triangles appear. And I figured out how to do that, and I got this idea through just understanding what I can do in programming. I did stuff kind of like this enough times that I have a good enough understanding of it. Now, kind of compare that to something like Dark Souls. Getting the right understanding of it isn't that hard. Anybody can get just the basic understanding of it probably within a couple hours. And after that, yeah, sure, you might want to figure out a new type of enemy, but after that it's just executing it. And that is where the unforgiving part of Dark Souls comes in. Because once I figure out what to do, and mostly how to do it, then it comes down to doing it. And then Dark Souls says, if you don't do it perfectly, you can start all the way over again. I mean, it's not that immediate, but seriously, the damage numbers of enemies in Dark Souls is just not nice. And I get it, not nice is a probably very weak argument against something, but well, fuck it and fuck that, it's fucking annoying. I know what I need to do, I am working on doing it. If I make a mistake, I want to correct it, not have to start over. A forgiving game allows you to correct a mistake. Dark Souls isn't forgiving. If you make a mistake, you can start all the way over again from the last bonfire, depending on how big your mistake was. Because, for instance, if I fuck up in Skyrim, well, I can take a potion, that means I now have one less potion, and it means that I know I fucked up, which is not something that I like knowing, but I can easily recover from it. The consequences of that mistake are basically all internal instead of external. And that is why I don't like Dark Souls. That's why I complain about how unforgiving it is. Not because it's an impossible game, but because it forces you to learn in a way that isn't my way of learning. And that when I've done my way of learning, that won't make me beat a challenge. That I can't make a mistake on the way and fix that mistake. No, that it's just, you made a mistake, now you die. That is not really something I care for. And because of that, I don't really care for Dark Souls. So, I hope that cleared some stuff up. This has been Phoenix, saying farewell.